The stagecoach door opened with a groan of rusted hinges, and what emerged was barely recognizable as a woman at all, just a collection of sharp angles wrapped in faded calico that hung like a funeral shroud from shoulders that seemed ready to collapse inward. Marshal Quinn stood on the dusty main street of Tonopah Junction, Nevada, his hand resting on his gun belt more from habit than necessity, and felt something twist hard in his chest at the sight of her stumbling down onto the wooden step, one skeletal hand gripping the door frame so tight her knuckles showed white through skin that looked like parchment stretched too thin. It was September of 1882, and the desert heat still beat down mercilessly despite the approaching autumn, shimmering off the packed earth and weathered storefronts that lined the single street cutting through this mining town that had sprung up 3 years earlier, when silver was discovered in the surrounding hills. Marshal Quinn had seen plenty of desperate souls arrive here seeking fortune or fleeing ruin, but nothing quite like this woman whose dress might have fit her once but now swallowed her whole, except where it caught on the painful jut of her collarbones and hip bones. The driver climbed down from his perch, not offering to help her with the single battered carpetbag that she pulled from inside the coach with trembling arms. "Tonopah Junction," he announced unnecessarily, already reaching for the mail pouch that was the real reason for his stop here. 20 minutes, then I am heading on to Goldfield." The woman swayed slightly as her feet found solid ground, and Marshal Quinn moved without thinking, covering the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Miss, you might want to sit down." His voice came out rougher than he intended, gravelly from too many years of breathing desert dust and barking orders at drunken miners. She turned to look at him, and he got his first clear view of her face. Beneath the bonnet that had seen better days, he saw eyes the color of storm clouds, huge in a face that was all hollows and sharp edges. Her cheekbones stood out like they might cut through her skin, and her lips were cracked and pale. But those eyes held something that made him stand a little straighter, some fierce determination that burned despite the obvious ravages of starvation. "I am quite all right, sir." The words came out with careful dignity, each one enunciated as though she was afraid of losing her grip on civilization itself. Her accent spoke of education, of a life that had once included more than just survival. "I am looking for the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson wrote that she had a room available." Marshal Quinn knew Martha Henderson well enough to know the woman ran a respectable establishment, and would take one look at this half-starved creature and find some excuse to turn her away. Martha was kind but practical, and she would not want someone who looked like they might die in her spare bedroom. "The boarding house is full up," he lied smoothly, already calculating. "But I have got a spare room in my place, and my housekeeper can set you up properly. Name is Marshal Quinn." "Most folks just call me Quinn." She studied him for a long moment, those storm cloud eyes searching his face for ulterior motives. He kept his expression open, honest, and waited. Finally, she nodded once, a sharp dip of her chin that made the tendons in her neck stand out like ropes. "Catherine Parker. Miss Catherine Parker. I appreciate your kindness, Marshal, but I must insist on paying rent. I have some money saved and I came here to work as a teacher. The town council hired me by correspondence." Quinn felt his estimation of her rise another notch. Starving or not, she had her pride intact. "We can discuss terms later. Right now, you look like you need a good meal and a soft bed, Miss Parker. My place is just down the street." He reached for her carpetbag, but she held onto it with surprising strength. "I can carry my own belongings, thank you." He let her keep her dignity and simply gestured for her to walk beside him. The bag could not have weighed more than a few pounds, but he saw the effort it cost her to keep it lifted as they made their way down the main street. Curious eyes followed them from doorways and windows. Tonopah Junction was small enough that any newcomer drew attention, but a woman this obviously desperate arriving alone would fuel gossip for weeks. His house sat at the end of the street, a sturdy wooden structure with a covered porch and actual glass in the windows, luxuries in a town where most buildings were still canvas and raw lumber. It had come with his position as marshal, one of the few perks of maintaining law and order in a place where tempers ran as hot as the summer sun and silver fever made men stupid with greed. "Rosa," he called as he opened the door, holding it for Catherine to step inside. "Rosa, I need you out here." The housekeeper emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Rosa Gutierrez had been with him since he took this position 2 years ago, a widow whose husband had died in a mining accident, and who ran his household with the same no-nonsense efficiency she had once used to raise 6 children. She took one look at Catherine and immediately switched into the mode Quinn thought of as her maternal general, all business and gentle competence. "Ay, Dios mío," Rosa breathed, crossing herself quickly. "This girl needs food immediately. Come, you sit down right now." She had Catherine installed in a chair at the kitchen table before the younger woman could protest, already pulling out bread and cold chicken and cheese from the icebox Quinn had shipped in at considerable expense. "I do not want to impose," Catherine began, but Rosa cut her off with a wave of her hand. "You be quiet now. The marshal will explain, but first you eat. Slowly, you understand. Small bites. If you have not been eating regular, too much too fast will make you sick." Quinn leaned against the doorframe and watched as Rosa set about the business of feeding Catherine with the focused intensity of a woman on a mission. Catherine ate with that same careful dignity she had shown earlier, taking small bites and chewing thoroughly, despite the fact that he could see the hunger burning in her eyes. She wanted to devour everything in front of her, but she maintained control, measured and deliberate even in her desperation. "How long since you ate a proper meal?" Rosa asked, her voice gentler now. Catherine set down the piece of bread she had been holding and stared at it for a moment before answering. 3 days, perhaps 4. I had some crackers on the stagecoach yesterday morning." She paused, then added with that same careful honesty, "Before that, it had been some time as well." Money was tight. Quinn felt his jaw tighten. 3 or 4 days. Looking at her, he would have guessed weeks, which meant she had been going hungry long before she climbed on that stagecoach. "What happened, Miss Parker, if you do not mind my asking?" She looked up at him, and for a moment he saw the full weight of whatever had driven her to this state. Then she blinked and it was gone, replaced by that fierce determination again. "My father died 6 months ago. He was a professor of literature in Boston. When he passed, I discovered that he had debts I knew nothing about. Everything we owned went to pay them, including our home. I had no other family, no prospects. Teaching was the only skill I possessed that might allow me to support myself. So I applied to every school district west of the Mississippi that was advertising for teachers. Tonopah Junction was the first to respond positively." The story came out matter-of-fact, without self-pity, but Quinn could read between the lines easily enough. 6 months of watching everything slip away, of stretching every penny until it screamed, of slow starvation as she saved every cent for the journey west. No wonder she looked like a strong wind might blow her away. "Well, you are here now," he said firmly, "and I can promise you that as long as you are under my roof, you will never miss another meal. Rosa will see to that." He glanced at his housekeeper, who nodded emphatically. "I will fatten her up good," Rosa agreed. "You are too skinny, girl. Men do not like skinny women. They want someone with some meat on their bones. We fix this." A ghost of a smile flickered across Catherine's face, the first Quinn had seen. It transformed her features, hinting at the beauty that might emerge once she was properly fed and rested. "I am not concerned with what men like, Mrs. Gutierrez. I am here to teach, not to find a husband." Rosa snorted. "You say that now. But a good man is worth having, and our Marshal here, he is a very good man. Not married, owns his own house, very respectable." Quinn felt heat creep up the back of his neck. "Rosa, leave the poor woman alone. She just arrived." But even as he said it, he found himself looking at Catherine with new eyes, imagining what she might look like with some weight on her bones and color in her cheeks. The thought surprised him. He had not seriously considered courting anyone since taking this position, too focused on establishing order in a wild town, and too aware of the dangers that came with his badge. Catherine was looking down at her plate again, but he caught the faint flush that had risen in her own cheeks. "I appreciate your hospitality, Marshal Quinn, but I really must insist on contributing to the household expenses. I have $30 saved. It is not much, but I can pay something each month once I receive my teaching salary." $30. She had crossed the entire country on $30, paying for stage coaches and trains and whatever food she could afford, which apparently had not been much. Quinn made a decision. "Tell you what, Miss Parker, you keep your money for now. Once you are settled in and receiving regular pay from the school board, we will work out a fair arrangement. Right now, you just focus on getting your strength back. School does not start for another 3 weeks, which gives you time to recover before you have to face a classroom full of children." She looked like she wanted to argue, but Rosa cut in before she could speak. "The Marshal is right. You need rest and food. 3 weeks we make you strong again. Now you finish eating, then I show you your room. You take a bath, sleep for as long as you need. Everything else can wait." Catherine finished the food on her plate with visible effort, clearly reaching the limit of what her shrunken stomach could handle. When she was done, Rosa led her upstairs to the spare bedroom, chattering about clean sheets and hot water for washing. Quinn heard their footsteps overhead and the sound of Rosa opening and closing doors, getting things ready. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the place where Catherine had sat, and wondered what he had just gotten himself into. He had acted on instinct, seeing someone in need and responding the only way he knew how. But now, with her presence already filling his house in a way he could not quite explain, he realized this was going to change things. He was going to have a woman living under his roof, a woman who had already stirred something in him that he had kept carefully dormant for years. The sound of water being poured into the tub upstairs brought him back to the present. He had work to do, rounds to make through the town, a report to write about the fight that had broken out at the saloon last night. But his mind kept drifting back to storm-cloud eyes and fierce determination, to a woman so starved her dress hung off her bones, but who still carried herself with dignity. He would make sure she never went hungry again. That much he could promise. As for the rest, well, he would have to wait and see what happened. Over the next few days, Quinn found himself rearranging his routines around Catherine's presence. He was used to living alone aside from Rosa's daytime presence, used to coming and going as he pleased without considering anyone else. But now, he found himself coming home for lunch instead of grabbing something at the saloon, found himself listening for the sound of her footsteps upstairs, found himself aware of her in ways that both intrigued and unsettled him. Rosa had taken charge of Catherine's recovery with the efficiency of a field general. 3 meals a day, substantial but not overwhelming, carefully calculated to rebuild strength without shocking a system that had been running on empty for too long. Catherine protested at first, insisting she could not possibly eat so much, but Rosa was immovable as a mountain on the subject. "You eat, girl. I do not want to hear arguments." And Catherine ate. Quinn watched her slowly begin to fill out, watched the sharpest edges of her bones become less prominent, watched faint color begin to return to her cheeks. She spent most of those first few days sleeping, her body demanding the rest it had been denied for so long. But when she was awake, she proved to be intelligent and well-read, with opinions on everything from politics to literature to the proper way to brew coffee. They fell into conversations easily, sitting on the porch in the evening when the worst heat had passed, talking about everything and nothing. Quinn found himself telling her about his life, about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about learning to handle a gun because it was necessary for survival, about eventually pinning on a badge because someone had to stand between chaos and order. "You enjoy it?" She asked one evening about a week after her arrival. "Being a marshal, I mean." He considered the question carefully. "Enjoy is probably not the right word, but it is necessary work and I am good at it. This town needs someone to keep the peace, especially with all the money flowing through from the mines. Men get stupid when silver is involved and stupid men do dangerous things. You sound like you have seen a lot of that." "Enough." He did not elaborate, and she was smart enough not to push. Some stories were not meant for pleasant evening conversations. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of orange and gold as it sank toward the horizon. "I was terrified on the stagecoach," she admitted suddenly. "The closer we got, the more I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, leaving everything I knew traveling to a place I had never seen, based on a few letters from a school board. It seemed insane. But you did it anyway." "I had no choice." "Well, I had a choice between starving in Boston or taking a chance out here. When you phrase it that way, the decision becomes simpler." She turned to look at him. "Thank you, Marshal Quinn, for taking me in, for feeding me, for not asking too many questions. I know it must seem strange having a stranger suddenly living in your house." "Call me Marcus," he heard himself say. "And it is not strange, it is just different, good different, I think." She smiled at him, a real smile this time, and he felt something warm unfurl in his chest. She was still too thin, still looked fragile despite the improvement from Rosa's determined feeding, but there was life in her eyes now, hope where before there had only been desperate determination. "Catherine, then," she replied. "If we are to be housemates, we should probably use first names." "Catherine suits you better than Miss Parker anyway." He meant it. She was Catherine, storm-eyed and fierce and quietly strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength. The school board president, Hiram Thornton, came by at the end of the second week to officially meet their new teacher. He was a portly man who had made his fortune in mining supply and now served on every civic committee in town, wielding his influence with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Quinn had never particularly liked him, but he respected the man's commitment to bringing education and civilization to Tonopah Junction. Thornton settled himself in Quinn's parlor with the air of someone doing a great favor, accepted Rosa's offer of coffee, and regarded Catherine with open assessment. "Miss Parker, your letters were most impressive, but I must confess I am surprised by your youth." The school board expected someone more mature. Quinn saw Catherine's spine straighten, saw the fire kindle in her eyes. "I am 22 years old, Mr. Thornton, and I have been assisting my father with his classes since I was 16. I am fully qualified to teach children up to the 8th grade level in all standard subjects, and I can additionally offer instruction in literature, basic Latin, and music if the school has access to a piano." 22. Quinn filed that information away, along with the surge of relief that she was not as young as her slight frame might have suggested. He was 31 himself, a gap, but not an unseemly one, Thornton harumphed. Well, yes, the school does have a piano, actually, donated by Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house. It is somewhat out of tune, but perhaps you can make use of it. He paused. I must ask, Miss Parker, and please do not take offense, but are you quite well? You seem rather delicate. Catherine's smile was cool and controlled. I am recovering from the rigors of travel, Mr. Thornton. I assure you that I am perfectly capable of managing a classroom. I will be ready to begin when school opens in 2 weeks. Actually, about that. Thornton pulled out a pocket watch and consulted it unnecessarily. Some members of the board have expressed concern about housing arrangements. We understood you would be staying at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. The situation of you living here with the marshal, well, it raises certain questions about propriety. Quinn felt his temper stir. Miss Parker is staying in my spare room with my housekeeper present as chaperone. Everything is perfectly respectable. I am not questioning your integrity, Marshal, but you must understand how it looks. An unmarried woman living in the home of an unmarried man, even with a housekeeper present. Well, people will talk. Let them talk. Catherine's voice was sharp. I am here to teach, Mr. Thornton, not to provide entertainment for gossips. My living arrangements are my own concern as long as they do not interfere with my professional duties. Thornton looked taken aback by her forceful response. He blustered for a moment, then seemed to reconsider his approach. Perhaps, Miss Parker, you might consider looking for alternative housing once you are more settled. I am certain Mrs. Henderson could make room. Perhaps I will, once I have had time to evaluate my options. But for now, I am grateful for the marshal's hospitality, and I will not be rushed into a decision simply to appease small-minded individuals who have nothing better to do than concern themselves with matters that do not affect them. Quinn found himself fighting back a grin. Catherine might look like a strong wind could blow her over, but she had steel in her spine and was not afraid to show it. Thornton clearly had not expected to face such firm resistance from someone he probably viewed as a desperate woman, who should be grateful for any employment at all. The school board president left shortly after, having extracted a promise from Catherine to visit the schoolhouse and review the curriculum materials within the next few days. When the door closed behind him, Catherine let out a long breath and sank back into her chair. That was boldly done, Quinn said, still fighting his amusement. That was foolish, Catherine corrected. I just antagonized the president of the school board. He could revoke my position before I even begin. He would not dare. The town needs a teacher and you are clearly qualified. Besides, Thornton is all bluster. Stand up to him and he backs down. You did exactly right. She looked uncertain. I should not have lost my temper. But the assumption that I would simply do whatever he wanted, the implication that my character was somehow questionable because I am staying here, it made me angry. Good. You should be angry. Your character is not in question, and neither is mine. Anyone who knows me knows I would never take advantage of a woman under my protection. The words came out more forcefully than he intended, but he meant them. Catherine was under his protection now, whether she realized it or not, and he would defend her reputation as fiercely as he would defend her physical safety. She studied him for a long moment. Why did you help me, Marcus? You did not know me. For all you knew, I could have been a criminal or a liar or someone bringing trouble to your doorstep. He had asked himself the same question over the past 2 weeks and had not found a simple answer. Because you needed help, and I could provide it. Because I have seen too many people fall through the cracks, ignored and forgotten, and I did not want to be someone who walked past when I could do something. Because when I looked at you, I saw someone worth saving." He paused. "And maybe because I was tired of living in this house alone with only Rosa for company during the day and my own thoughts at night." Her expression softened. "You were lonely." "I suppose I was. I did not realize it until you got here, but yes, lonely sounds about right." She reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the arm of his chair, just a brief contact but enough to send warmth shooting through him. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything. You saved my life, you know. If you had not taken me in, if you had let me go to that boarding house where Mrs. Henderson would likely have turned me away, I do not know what would have happened to me. You would have figured something out. You are a survivor, Catherine. I saw that the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, perhaps, but I am glad I did not have to find out. I am glad you were there." The next 2 weeks passed in a strange sort of domesticity that Quinn had never experienced before. He found himself acutely aware of Catherine's presence, of the sound of her moving around the house, of her voice as she read aloud in the evenings from books borrowed from Thornton's private library. She was putting on weight steadily under Rosa's dedicated care, her face filling out so that she no longer looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin. Her eyes had taken on a brightness that spoke of returning health, and color had returned to her lips and cheeks. She was becoming beautiful, he realized. Or perhaps she had always been beautiful, just hidden under the ravages of starvation and exhaustion. Either way, he found himself noticing things about her that had nothing to do with concern for her health and everything to do with an entirely different kind of interest. The way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The sound of her laugh, rare but genuine when it came. The graceful way she moved despite her lingering thinness. The intelligence that sparkled in her eyes when they debated some point of philosophy or politics. He admitted to himself late one night while lying in his bed knowing she was sleeping just down the hall, falling in love with her. The realization should have terrified him. He had known her barely 3 weeks. She was his house guest, under his protection, dependent on his charity until she began drawing her teaching salary. The power imbalance was obvious and troubling. He could not act on his feelings, could not say anything that might make her feel obligated or pressured. But knowing that did not make the feelings go away. If anything, keeping them buried seemed to make them stronger, so that every casual interaction felt charged with unspoken possibility. Every accidental touch sent electricity racing through his veins. He was not the only one noticing Catherine, either. When he accompanied her to the schoolhouse to meet with Thornton and review the curriculum, several of the town's young men went out of their way to introduce themselves. George Miller from the general store, who had inherited the business from his father and was considered quite the catch. Thomas Wright, who ran the assay office and was known for his poetry, bad though it was. Even Samuel Diaz, the young doctor who had set up practice 6 months earlier and had most of the unmarried women in town sighing over his dark eyes and gentle hands. Quinn watched them circle around Catherine like wolves around a sheep and felt his jaw tighten with possessive jealousy he had no right to feel. She was not his. She owed him nothing beyond gratitude. If one of these men caught her interest, he should be happy for her, but he was not happy. He wanted to tell them all to back off, to leave her alone, to stop looking at her like she was some prize to be won. Catherine, for her part, was polite but distant with all of them, accepting their introductions and flattery with the same cool courtesy she had shown Thornton. If she noticed the way they vied for her attention, she gave no sign of being impressed or interested. "You could have your pick of them," Quinn commented later as they walked back to his house, the schoolhouse inspection complete. "I am not interested in being picked like an apple from a tree," Catherine replied, Besides, they are not interested in me. They are interested in the novelty of a new woman in town. Give it a few weeks and they will have moved on to someone else. I do not think so. You are intelligent, educated, and beautiful. Those are rare qualities out here. She stopped walking and turned to look at him with an expression he could not quite read. You think I am beautiful? He had not meant to say it out loud, but there was no taking it back now. Yes, I do. Very beautiful. A faint flush rose in her cheeks, the first time he had seen her truly flustered. I am not sure what to say to that. Thank you, I suppose. You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. He started walking again, and after a moment she fell into step beside him. They did not speak for the rest of the walk home, but the silence felt different now, weighted with things neither of them was ready to say out loud. School began on a Monday morning in early October, when the desert heat had finally broken and the air held a hint of autumn crispness. Quinn walked Catherine to the schoolhouse, carrying the stack of books and materials she had prepared. 23 children showed up that first day, ranging from 6 years old to 14, the sons and daughters of miners and shopkeepers, and the few ranchers who worked the lands surrounding the town. Quinn watched from outside as Catherine organized them into rows based on age and ability, her voice carrying through the open windows with calm authority. She had been nervous that morning. He had seen it in the way she could not quite finish her breakfast, but no trace of that nervousness showed now. She was in her element, a born teacher stepping into the role she was meant to fill. He made himself walk away, made himself go about his duties, but he found excuses to pass by the schoolhouse throughout the day. Each time, he heard Catherine's voice, teaching geography or arithmetic or reading, and felt a sense of pride that was entirely inappropriate given that he had no claim on her whatsoever. When school let out at 3, he was waiting outside. The children streamed past him, loud and energetic after hours of sitting still. Catherine emerged last, looking tired but satisfied. How was it? He asked. Wonderful. Exhausting but wonderful. They are good children, most of them. A few troublemakers in the older group, but nothing I cannot handle. She smiled at him, and he felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. Thank you for walking me this morning. You did not have to do that. I wanted to. Besides, it gives the gossips less to talk about if people see us together in public. Makes it clear everything is above board. Is that the only reason? The question was asked lightly, but he heard the undercurrent in it, the hint of something more. No, he admitted. It is not the only reason. I like spending time with you, Catherine. I like having you in my house, sharing meals with you, talking with you in the evenings. I know I should probably not say that, but I am tired of pretending otherwise. She bit her lip. A gesture he was learning meant she was thinking carefully about her words. I like spending time with you too, Marcus. More than I should, probably. You have been incredibly kind to me, and I do not want to confuse gratitude with something else. But I think what I feel is something else. I think it has been for a while now. His pulse kicked up a notch. What do you feel? I do not know exactly. Interest, certainly. Attraction. The desire to know you better, to understand what makes you the man you are. Is that enough of an answer? It was more than enough. It was everything and nothing, a door opened just a crack but not yet swung wide. It is a start, he said. We have time to figure out the rest. Do we? People are already talking about us living under the same roof. Eventually, I will need to find other housing to protect both our reputations. And when I do, we will not have the same opportunities to spend time together. Everything will be different. She was right, and the thought of her moving out, of not having her presence filling his house and his life, felt wrong in a way he could not quite articulate. Then maybe we should not wait. Maybe we should figure out what this is between us before circumstances force the issue." "What are you suggesting?" He took a breath, aware that he was stepping out onto uncertain ground but unable to stop himself. "I am suggesting that we court properly, that we let people know we are seeing each other with serious intent, that we give this thing between us a chance to grow into something real. We barely know each other, Marcus. It has been less than a month. I know, and maybe that makes me insane for even suggesting it, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I think about you constantly. I worry about you when you are out of my sight. When you smile at me, it feels like the sun coming out. And if that is not enough of a foundation to build something on, then I do not know what is." Catherine stared at him, her storm cloud eyes searching his face. He let her look, let her see everything he was feeling, held nothing back. Finally, she nodded slowly. "All right, we can try. But slowly, Marcus. I need time to be certain that what I feel is real and not just gratitude or the comfort of having someone care about me after being alone for so long." "Slowly," he agreed, even though everything in him wanted to rush forward to claim her and make her his before the world could intervene. "We will do this right." And they did try to do it right, to court properly by the standards of their time and place. Marcus called on Catherine formally in the evenings, sitting in the parlor under Rosa's approving eye, talking about their days and their dreams and the thousand small things that made up a life. He brought her wildflowers he picked in the desert, tough little blooms that somehow survived in the harsh environment. She baked him cookies, terrible burnt things that he ate every crumb of, because she had made them for him. They attended church together on Sundays, sitting side by side in the rough wooden pews while the traveling preacher, who came through once a month, delivered sermons about salvation and sin. Marcus could not concentrate on the words, too aware of Catherine's presence next to him, of the way their shoulders almost touched, of the smell of the lavender soap she used. They went for walks in the evening, when the desert cooled, and the sky turned colors that seemed impossible, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up as the daughter of a professor, about a childhood spent in libraries and lecture halls, about her mother who had died when Catherine was 10 and left a hole nothing else had ever quite filled. He told her about learning to shoot when he was 8, about the time a rattlesnake almost killed him when he was 12, about his parents who still worked the ranch in Texas and wrote him letters he was terrible at answering, about the first man he had killed in self-defense when he was 19, and how the memory still woke him some nights in a cold sweat. She listened to all of it without judgment, without the horror or fascination that story usually provoked. She just took his hand and held it, her thumb tracing circles on his palm, and said, "That must have been terrible. I am sorry you had to carry that." The weeks turned into months. Catherine's teaching became the center of the town's pride. Parents bragging about what their children were learning, about how Miss Parker was so much better than the last teacher who had barely been able to read himself. She organized a Christmas pageant that had half the town in tears and the other half laughing at the children's earnest performances. Marcus watched from the back of the schoolhouse, leaning against the wall, and felt something settle into place in his chest. This was what he wanted. This woman, this life, this sense of belonging to something bigger than just himself and his badge. After the pageant, he walked Catherine home through the cold December night, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. "That was wonderful," he said. "You should be proud." "I am." They worked so hard, the children. Even the troublemakers threw themselves into it. She was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, I have been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About where this is going. We have been courting for 3 months now, and I need to know your intentions. Is this just companionship to you, or is it something more?" He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Catherine Parker, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are strong and intelligent and kind and beautiful, and I am in love with you. I have been in love with you since the day you stood up to Hiram Thornton and told him exactly what you thought of his concerns about propriety. Maybe even before that. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to give you children if that is what you want, and a home, and every bit of love I have in me. That is my intention. That has been my intention from the start, even if I did not have the sense to realize it right away." She was crying, he realized, tears streaming down her face in the moonlight. "I love you too. God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. When I got on that stagecoach in Boston, I thought my life was over. I thought I was going to die in some God-forsaken town in the middle of nowhere, alone and forgotten. And then you were there, and you fed me and gave me a home and made me feel like I mattered again. You saved me, Marshal Quinn, in every way a person can be saved. So yes, I will marry you. I cannot imagine doing anything else." He kissed her then, there in the middle of the street with stars wheeling overhead and the desert wind cold against their faces. She kissed him back with a fierceness that took his breath away, her hands fisting in his coat, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers and laughed. "What is funny?" she asked. "Nothing is funny. Everything is perfect. I am just happy. Me too. Happier than I ever thought I could be." They were married in January of 1883, in the same church where they had sat together every Sunday for months. Rosa cried through the entire ceremony. Hiram Thornton gave Catherine away, apparently having decided that his initial concerns about propriety were misplaced. Most of the town turned out to witness the marshal marrying the schoolteacher, a romantic story that would be told and retold for years to come. Catherine wore a dress that Rosa and Martha Henderson had helped her make, pale blue silk that brought out the color of her eyes. She had filled out beautifully over the past 5 months, no longer skeletal but curved and healthy and glowing with happiness. Marcus wore his best suit and thought he might burst from pride when she walked down the aisle toward him. The traveling preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Marcus kissed her in front of God and everybody, not caring who saw or what they thought. She was his now, legally and morally and in every way that mattered, and he was hers just as completely. The reception was held at the boarding house, Martha Henderson insisting on hosting and refusing to take no for an answer. There was food and music and dancing, miners and shopkeepers and ranchers all celebrating together. Catherine danced with Marcus, her head on his shoulder, moving slowly to a fiddle tune someone was playing. "Are you happy?" he asked her quietly. "Happier than I have words for. You kept your promise, you know." "Which promise?" "You said I would never go hungry again." "You have given me so much more than food, Marcus. You have given me a home and a purpose and love. You have given me everything." He tightened his arms around her. "You gave me all of that too. I was just existing before you came here, going through the motions. Now I am living." "We are living together," she corrected. "And we are going to have a wonderful life." They did have a wonderful life, though it was not always easy. Marcus's work remained dangerous, though he tried to shield Catherine from the worst of it. There were still fights to break up, disputes to settle, the occasional shootout when miners got too drunk and too angry over claims they thought had been jumped. But he always came home to her, always found her waiting with dinner on the table and love in her eyes. Catherine continued teaching, her classroom growing as more families moved to Tonopah Junction, drawn by the silver boom. She became known throughout the region as an exceptional educator, receiving offers from larger towns that she always turned down because this was home now. This place where she had arrived starving and desperate, and found everything she had never dared hope for. In the fall of 1883, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Marcus on a cool October evening, exactly 1 year after that first day of school, and watched his face cycle through shock and joy and terror in rapid succession. "Are you all right?" he asked, immediately pulling her into his arms as though she might break. "Do you need to sit down? Should you still be teaching? Is it safe?" She laughed at his concern. "I am perfectly fine, Marcus. Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. I am healthy and strong, and Dr. Diaz says there is no reason I cannot continue my normal activities for several more months. You are going to be a father." "A father," he repeated, the words sounding strange on his tongue. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," she confirmed. Rosa was overjoyed at the news, immediately beginning to knit tiny clothes and plan nursery arrangements. The whole town seemed to celebrate with them, students bringing Catherine small gifts, women offering advice both wanted and unwanted about pregnancy and childbirth. Catherine taught through the winter, finally leaving her position in March when she could no longer comfortably stand in front of the classroom for hours at a time. A temporary teacher was brought in to finish the school year, a young man fresh from a teaching college in California who seemed terrified of the rough mining town children. Marcus found himself terrified as well, but for different reasons. Every story he had ever heard about women dying in childbirth seemed to haunt him. He became overprotective, barely letting Catherine out of his sight, until she finally sat him down and told him firmly that she loved him, but he needed to stop treating her like she was made of glass. Their son was born on a warm night in June, arriving after 12 hours of labor that aged Marcus about 20 years. Dr. Diaz delivered the baby with Rosa assisting, while Marcus paced the parlor downstairs and tried not to imagine all the terrible things that could go wrong. When Rosa finally called him upstairs and he saw Catherine propped up in their bed, exhausted but smiling with a tiny bundle in her arms, everything else fell away. He approached slowly, afraid to disturb them, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. Catherine looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. "Meet your son. I was thinking we could name him Michael, after your father." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion too big for words. "Michael Quinn. It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He sat down carefully on the edge of the bed and put his arm around Catherine, the three of them a unit now, a family. Michael was a healthy, loud baby who kept them up at all hours, and somehow managed to be the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen, even when he was screaming at 3 in the morning. Catherine took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, though Marcus could see the exhaustion in her eyes those first few months. He helped as much as he could, taking the baby for walks when he was fussy, changing diapers despite the teasing from other men in town about being too soft, sitting up with Catherine during those long nighttime feedings. This was what partnership meant, he believed, sharing both the joys and the burdens. When Michael was 6 months old, Catherine started talking about going back to teaching. The temporary teacher had proven inadequate and left town, and the school board was desperate for someone qualified to take over. Marcus was reluctant at first, worried about her taking on too much, but Catherine was insistent. "I need this, Marcus. I love being Michael's mother, but I need to be Catherine too, to use my mind and my training. Rosa has agreed to watch him during school hours, and I will be home every afternoon. Please understand." He did understand, even if he worried. So Catherine returned to the classroom when Michael was 8 months old, and somehow she managed to balance both roles with grace. Michael thrived under Rose's care, and Catherine came home energized by her work rather than drained by it. The years passed in a blur of everyday moments that added up to a life. Michael learned to walk and talk and read, proving to have inherited his mother's quick mind and his father's stubborn determination. Catherine taught generation after generation of children, becoming a fixture in Tonopah Junction, respected and admired by everyone who knew her. Marcus continued his work as marshal, growing into the role until he could not imagine doing anything else. He cleaned up the town bit by bit, establishing order without crushing the rough vitality that made the place what it was. Men still got drunk and fought, but they knew where the line was now, knew that Marshal Quinn would not tolerate the kind of chaos that had once been commonplace. In 1887, Catherine became pregnant again. She was more confident this time, less worried about every little thing, though Marcus was no less terrified than he had been the first time. Their daughter was born in February of 1888, arriving quickly and easily compared to Michael's difficult entrance into the world. They named her Clara, after Catherine's mother. She had Catherine's storm-cloud eyes and Marcus's dark hair, and from the beginning she was fearless in ways that both delighted and terrified her parents. Where Michael was cautious and thoughtful, Clara was impulsive and bold, climbing trees before she could properly walk, catching snakes and bringing them home, insisting on learning to ride as soon as her legs were long enough to reach stirrups. Marcus adored both his children, but he had to admit that Clara held a special place in his heart. She reminded him so much of Catherine, of that fierce determination he had first seen when a starving woman stepped off a stagecoach and refused to let her circumstances break her. The family settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings were chaotic, getting children ready for school and Marcus out on his rounds. Catherine taught until mid-afternoon, then came home to help with homework and prepare dinner. Evenings were spent together, the whole family gathered in the parlor, reading or talking or playing games. On Sundays they still attended church, then often took picnics out into the desert, teaching the children to appreciate the harsh beauty of the landscape that surrounded them. Marcus watched his children grow and his wife thrive and felt grateful every single day for the twist of fate that had brought Catherine to his town, to his doorstep, to his life. In 1891, when Michael was 7 and Clara was 3, the mining boom that had sustained Tonopah Junction began to slow. The richest veins of silver had been tapped out, and miners began drifting away to new strikes in other parts of Nevada and Arizona. The town did not die, but it contracted, becoming smaller and quieter. Marcus considered moving, looking for marshal positions in larger towns that could offer more security and better opportunities for his children. But Catherine would not hear of it. "This is our home, Marcus. These are our people. We do not abandon them just because times are hard. Besides, the children are happy here, we are happy here. Why would we leave?" So they stayed and were glad they did. Tonopah Junction might have been smaller, but it was stable, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody else, where children could run free without their parents worrying, where community meant something real. Marcus's role as marshal became less about breaking up fights and more about mediating disputes, helping neighbors work through their differences. He found he liked this version of the job better than the more violent early years, liked feeling like he was building something rather than just maintaining order through force. Catherine's school shrank as well, but that meant smaller class sizes and more individual attention for each student. She expanded the curriculum to include more advanced subjects for the older children. teaching them things they would need to know if they wanted to go on to university or professional training. Several of her former students wrote her letters from colleges back east, thanking her for giving them the foundation they needed to succeed. In 1895, when Marcus was 44 and Catherine was 35, they found themselves unexpectedly expecting their third child. It had been 7 years since Clara's birth, and they had assumed their family was complete. The surprise pregnancy brought mixed emotions, excitement tempered with worry about Catherine's age and the risks involved. But the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in the spring of 1896, they welcomed another son. They named him Thomas, and he was a calm, easy baby who seemed content to observe the world with wide, curious eyes. Michael, now 12, took his role as big brother seriously, helping with the baby and protecting him fiercely. Clara, 8 years old and still wild as the wind, was less interested in the infant but tolerated him with good-natured patience. Life continued its steady rhythm. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Michael wanted to be a lawyer, spending hours reading law books Marcus borrowed for him from the county courthouse in Goldfield. Clara talked about becoming a rancher, raising horses in the mountains. Thomas was still too young to know what he wanted, but he showed early signs of artistic talent, drawing pictures of everything he saw with surprising skill. Marcus realized one evening, watching his family gathered around the dinner table arguing good-naturedly about something trivial, that he had everything he had never known he wanted. The dangerous, lonely man he had been before Catherine arrived had been transformed into someone softer, someone connected to other people in ways that made him vulnerable but also so much stronger. "What are you thinking about?" Catherine asked later, when the children were in bed and they sat together on the porch as they had so many evenings over the years. "About how lucky I am. About how different my life would be if you had not gotten on that stagecoach. About how grateful I am that I was standing on that street the day you arrived." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I think about that too sometimes, about how close I came to giving up, to just lying down and letting go, about how you gave me reasons to keep fighting. You saved my life, Marcus. You saved mine too. I just did not realize I needed saving until you showed me what living actually meant." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. After all these years, they could still be quiet together, still find peace in each other's presence without needing to fill the space with words. "You ever regret it?" Catherine asked suddenly. "Taking in a strange woman, tying yourself to her, giving up the freedom to live your life however you wanted?" "Never, not for a single second. You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Good." "Because I would not let you go even if you tried." He laughed and kissed the top of her head. "I have no intention of going anywhere. You are stuck with me, Catherine Quinn. I can live with that." The years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. Michael left for law school in San Francisco when he was 19, writing long letters home about his studies and his wonder at the big city. Catherine cried for a week after he left, though she tried to hide it. Marcus held her at night and told her their son would be fine, that they had raised him right, that letting him go was part of loving him. Clara, at 15, had calmed down slightly but retained her essential wildness. She had started courting a young rancher from outside town, a man named Patrick O'Brien, who seemed capable of keeping up with her spirit while respecting her independence. Marcus watched them together and saw the same kind of partnership he shared with Catherine, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Thomas, at 9, remained quiet and artistic, but he had developed a keen sense of justice that reminded Marcus of himself at that age. The boy could not stand to see anyone treated unfairly, often coming home with stories about standing up for younger children or defending those who could not defend themselves. In 1902, Catherine was 42, and Marcus was 51. They had been married for 19 years, and Marcus loved her more than he had thought possible to love anyone. She had gray threading through her dark hair now, lines around her eyes from years of smiling and squinting at students and reading by lamplight. To him, she had never been more beautiful. One evening in late summer, they took a walk out into the desert, just the two of them, leaving the children home under Michael's supervision during his summer visit home from law school. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange and red, and Catherine stopped to look at the view. "Do you remember the first time we walked out here together?" she asked. "I remember every moment we have spent together. That is a terrible lie, but I appreciate the sentiment." She turned to face him. "I have been thinking about our story, about how it started with me arriving here more dead than alive, with my dress hanging off my bones and no hope left in me. About how you fed me and sheltered me and loved me back to life. It sounds like a fairy tale when I say it like that, but it was real." "It is real. It is the realest thing in my life," Marcus agreed. "The truest thing. I want you to know that I understand what you did for me. I understood it then, even though I was too proud and too scared to say it properly. You did not have to help me. Most people would not have. But you saw someone in need and you responded with kindness and generosity and love. You made sure I never went hungry again, not just for food, but for everything else a person needs to truly live. Safety, purpose, love, family, home." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Catherine, I did not do anything special. I just did what any decent person would do. No. Most people would have walked past. Most people would have thought I was someone else's problem, but you did not. You saw me and you helped me and you changed everything. I need you to know that I will spend the rest of my life grateful for that moment when you decided I was worth saving." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "You were always worth saving. You just needed someone to see it, and I am the lucky one, Catherine. I am the one who gets to spend my life with you, who gets to see you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I am the one whose children carry your intelligence and your strength. Everything good in my life comes from that moment when you stepped off that stagecoach and I decided to take a chance." She tilted her face up to kiss him, and he poured everything he felt into that kiss, all the love and gratitude and wonder that she had brought into his life. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she was smiling. "We should get back. The children will wonder where we have gone. Let them wonder. I want a few more minutes alone with my wife." So they stood there as the sun sank below the horizon and the desert cooled around them. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The years continued their steady march. Michael graduated from law school and opened a practice in San Francisco. But he came home often to visit, bringing with him a young woman named Elizabeth, whom he married in 1905. Catherine gained her first grandchild, a girl named Sarah, in 1906, and cried happy tears while holding the baby and telling Elizabeth stories about Michael as a child. Clara married Patrick O'Brien in 1904, in a ceremony held on his ranch with all of Tonopah Junction in attendance. Marcus walked his daughter down the aisle and tried not to think about how fast time had gone, how his wild little girl had become a capable, confident woman. She and Patrick built a successful horse breeding operation, and Clara proved to have inherited her mother's head for business along with her father's stubbornness. Thomas, at 17, announced his intention to become a doctor. He had been assisting doctor Diaz for 2 years, learning everything the older man could teach him, and showed real aptitude for medicine. Marcus and Catherine helped him apply to medical schools, eventually securing him a place at a program in Denver. In 1908, Marcus retired as Marshal. He was 57 years old and had served Tonopah Junction for 26 years. The town threw him a celebration that embarrassed him terribly and touched him deeply. They presented him with a watch engraved with his name and years of service. And Hiram Thornton, now in his 70s and semi-retired himself, gave a speech about how Marshal Quinn had tamed the wild town and made it safe for families and civilization. Marcus stood up to give his own speech and found himself looking at Catherine in the crowd, her eyes shining with pride. "I did not do any of this alone," he said. "Everything I accomplished was made possible by my wife, who showed me what it meant to be part of a community, what it meant to care about something bigger than myself. She is the real hero of this story, not me." Catherine smiled at him, and he saw in her face the same fierce determination he had fallen in love with 26 years earlier, tempered now by experience and softened by love but still burning bright. Retirement suited Marcus. He spent his days helping Clara with the horses, reading the law books Michael sent him, going on long walks with Catherine. They traveled some, visiting Michael and his growing family in San Francisco, taking a trip to see Thomas in Denver, even going back east to Boston so Catherine could see her old home one last time. Standing outside the house where she had grown up, Catherine gripped Marcus's hand tight. "It seems smaller than I remembered, less important. Funny how that happens. Nevada is your home now, has been for a long time." "Yes, Nevada is home, you are home. I do not think I could live anywhere else now, anywhere you are not." They returned to Tonopah Junction with relief, glad to be back in the place they had built their life together. In 1914, Catherine finally retired from teaching at the age of 54. She had taught for 31 years, educating hundreds of children, and the town named the school after her in recognition of her service. The Catherine Parker Quinn School, they called it, and she cried when they unveiled the sign. Marcus stood beside her during the ceremony, his arm around her waist, and thought about how far they had come. This woman who had arrived wearing a dress that hung off her bones, starving and desperate, had become the heart of this community. She had taught their children, shaped their future, given them hope and education and the tools they needed to build better lives, and she had given him everything: love and partnership and family, a reason to be better than he had been, a home in the truest sense of the word. They spent their retirement years surrounded by family. Michael brought his wife and children to visit every summer, the house filling with noise and laughter. Clara came by weekly with Patrick and their 3 children. Clara having become a mother with the same fierce dedication she brought to everything else. Thomas finished medical school and opened his practice in Reno, but he too came home regularly, bringing with him stories of the wider world and the changes sweeping through the country. Marcus and Catherine became the center of an expanding web of children and grandchildren, their lives rich with the connections they had built over decades. They took walks every evening, just the 2 of them, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. They sat on their porch and watched sunsets, marveling at how beautiful the world could be. In 1920, they celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary. Marcus was 69 and Catherine was 60, their hair silver now but their love as strong as ever. The children threw them a party, 3 generations gathering to celebrate the marriage that had started, when a starving woman stepped off a stagecoach and a lonely marshal decided to help her. Marcus stood to give a toast, looking around at all the faces assembled, seeing traces of himself and Catherine in each of them. 37 years ago, I made the best decision of my life. I saw someone in need and I helped her, not knowing that in helping her, I was saving myself. Catherine, you have been my partner, my love, my best friend, the mother of my children and the grandmother of my grandchildren. You have made my life richer and fuller than I ever imagined possible. I thank God every day that you got on that stagecoach and came to Tonopah Junction. I love you more than words can say. Catherine stood and kissed him, not caring that everyone was watching. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. And I love you, Marshal Quinn. You made sure I never went hungry again, not just for food, but for love and purpose and home. You gave me everything. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. It has been the greatest adventure of my life. They cut the cake and danced to music. Someone played on Catherine's old, out-of-tune piano, surrounded by the family they had built together. Marcus held his wife close and thought about that first moment he had seen her, about how fragile she had looked, about how he could never have guessed that the desperate woman stepping off that stagecoach would become the center of his entire world. But she had, and he had kept his promise. She had never gone hungry again, not in any way that mattered. They had fed each other, body and soul, for 37 years, and if God was kind, they would have many more years ahead of them. The party went late into the night, the house full of laughter and love. When everyone finally left and it was just the two of them again, Marcus and Catherine sat on their porch in the darkness, holding hands and listening to the desert wind. "Happy?" he asked, the same question he had asked her so many times over the years. "Happier than I have any right to be," she answered, the same answer she always gave. "You, happiest man alive," he said truthfully. "Then, now, and forever." She squeezed his hand. Forever sounds about right, and it was right. They lived out their remaining years in that same house in Tonopah Junction, Nevada, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had served. Marcus died peacefully in his sleep in 1928 at the age of 77, Catherine beside him as she had been for 45 years. Catherine followed him 2 years later in 1930, at the age of 70. They were buried side by side in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the town, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their real legacy was not in stone. It was in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward their love and their strength. It was in the school that still bore Catherine's name, still educating the children of Tonopah Junction. It was in the stories people told about Marshal Quinn, who had tamed the wild town, and about the school teacher who had arrived starving and desperate and become the heart of the community. It was in the love story that began with a dress hanging off the bones of a woman who had lost everything, and a cowboy who made sure she never went hungry again. A story about seeing someone in need and choosing to help, about finding love in unexpected places, about building a life together against all odds. It was a story that lasted far beyond their lifetimes, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of kindness, and that love, when given freely and cherished deeply, can transform not just 2 lives but an entire community. Their story became legend in Tonopah Junction, told and retold with embellishments and adjustments, but always keeping the essential truth at its core. That once upon a time in the wild west of Nevada, a starving woman and a lonely marshal found each other and built something lasting and true. That they loved each other fiercely, and raised their family with dedication, and served their community with honor. That they showed everyone around them what partnership really meant, what commitment really meant, what love really meant when you stripped away all the romance and poetry and just looked at the daily choice to care for another person, to put their needs alongside your own, to build something together that neither could have built alone. And in the end, that was the real story. Not just about hunger satisfied or loneliness ended, though those things mattered too, but about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose to take a chance on love despite all the reasons they might have held back, and who spent the rest of their lives grateful for that choice. The dress that had hung off her bones when she arrived became a relic, preserved by the family and eventually donated to the local historical society. Children on school trips would see it displayed behind glass and hear the story of Catherine Parker Quinn, who had arrived in that dress with nothing but determination and had left a legacy that shaped their town for generations. And next to that dress was Marshal Quinn's badge, the one he had worn for 26 years while keeping the peace and building a community. Two artifacts, one story, a testament to what can happen when compassion meets courage, when kindness meets need, when love is given the chance to grow into something eternal. Their children lived long lives, carrying forward the lessons their parents had taught them. Michael became a respected judge in San Francisco, known for his fairness and integrity. Clara's horse ranch became famous throughout Nevada, her breeding program producing some of the finest animals in the state. Thomas became a surgeon, saving countless lives and teaching the next generation of doctors. Each of them told their children about Marcus and Catherine, about the love story that had started with a starving woman and a marshal with a kind heart. Each of them tried to live up to the example their parents had set, to be as generous and brave and loving as the two people who had built their family from nothing. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across the country, but many of them came back to Tonopah Junction at least once in their lives, wanting to see the place where their family's story had begun. They walked the streets their great-grandparents had walked, stood in front of the school that bore Catherine's name, visited the graves on the hill. And standing there, looking out over the desert that had been the backdrop to such an epic love story, they understood something fundamental about what it meant to be human. That we are all capable of extraordinary acts if we simply choose to care about each other, to see the people around us not as strangers or problems, but as fellow travelers on this difficult journey through life. That sometimes all it takes to change a life is a meal offered to someone hungry, a roof given to someone desperate, a hand extended to someone fallen. That the greatest love stories are not the ones that happen easily, but the ones that are forged through hardship and choice and daily recommitment to caring for another person. Marcus and Catherine's story became part of the mythology of the American West, taking its place alongside all the other tales of pioneers and settlers, outlaws and lawmen, dreamers and builders, who had shaped this vast and beautiful and brutal landscape into something approaching civilization. But their story stood apart because it was not about conquest or violence or the taming of nature. It was about love, pure and simple and complicated and messy and absolutely beautiful love, the kind that feeds hungry souls as surely as bread feeds hungry bodies. The kind that transforms not through grand gestures, but through 1,000 small acts of kindness and consideration and partnership. The kind that lasts not because it is easy, but because both people choose it every single day for the rest of their lives. And that was the real ending to the story of Catherine Parker and Marcus Quinn. Not in their deaths, though those came peacefully after long and full lives, but in the legacy they left behind, in the love they shared and passed down, in the lessons they taught just by living their lives with integrity and compassion and fierce dedication to each other. In a dusty Nevada town called Tonopah Junction, a woman wearing a dress that hung off her bones stepped down from a stagecoach and found everything she had been missing. A marshal standing on that dusty street saw her and made a choice that changed both their lives forever. He made sure she never went hungry again, and in return, she filled his life with love and purpose and joy. And they lived happily ever after, not in the fairy tale sense where everything is perfect and easy, but in the real sense where happiness is built day by day, meal by meal, conversation by conversation, through all the ups and downs that life brings. They chose each other and they kept choosing each other, and that choice made all the difference. The end of their story was really just a beginning, the start of a family line that would spread across generations, carrying forward the love and strength and values that Marcus and Catherine had embodied. Every child born to their descendants carried a piece of that story, a reminder that love can flourish even in the harshest environments if given the chance to take root. And so the story that began with hunger and desperation ended with abundance and joy, with a family gathered around a table sharing meals and love, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who knew they were part of something larger than themselves. They were part of a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of one person seeing another's need and choosing to help, and finding in that choice everything they had been searching for. Marcus Quinn and Catherine Parker Quinn lived and loved and built a legacy that outlasted their mortal lives, that continued in every child taught in the school bearing her name, in every person who heard their story and felt inspired to act with similar kindness and courage. They proved that the greatest adventures are not always about riding off into the sunset, but sometimes about staying put and building something lasting with the person you love. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.